Have you seen that video?
To many of you individually is the bad news is that the transitional authority figures, they didn't pass their background check with the FBI. Okay. They've got a tough history and one that we understand. But on the flip side of it is if we engage them, it may work out, it may not work out. If we did not engage them, it was guaranteed to not work out. In fact, it is our assessment that, frankly, the transitional authority, given the challenges they're facing, are maybe weeks, not many months, away from potential collapse and a full-scale civil war of epic proportions, basically the country splitting up. The good news is that there is a Syrian national identity. It is one of the places in the Middle East where Alawis and Druze and Christians and Sunni and Shia have lived along, and Kurds have lived alongside each other underneath the banner of a Syrian identity until it was broken by Butcher, Assad, who pitted them against each other. So they face a number of challenges.
A full-scale epic war. I mean, what are they thinking? Seriously. Here, let me show you the next video, and that will explain it best. Ranfield, can you...
Before we get into that, the part where he talks about this, Syrian identity with, and then he talks about, the Arabs, the Alawis, the Druze, the Christians get along, and I don't know how well they've been getting along. And as far as getting along, it's more because they had the Assad regime throughout its generations. They've kept an iron boot on on people's throats there. So it's not
Yeah.
exactly quite a kumbaya situation that we're talking about here.
No, actually, they never really got along. The only way they got along is because Islam submitted them, and they had to either pretend to be Muslims or to be persecuted. They're trying to make Syria look good lately and ignoring a lot of stuff.
Well, and why are we making them look good? I mean, consider a week ago, the U.S. They lifted the sanctions on Syria, right? So you can't in the same breath say like, oh, well, yeah, Syria is still really terrible and evil, but we're going to lift sanctions on them. So if you lift sanctions, then you have to at least try to make spin it positive.
Yeah, let me show you the next video. Ranfield, can you pull that video out?
هذا الإرهابي السافل الذي يتولى وزارة الدفاع السوري الآن ويتقبله المسؤولون العرب.
Yeah, so right now the two figures that are going to be shown,
ولسيده وأمير جماعته
الإرهابية officials in the current government.
الغربيون ها هو موقفه، رؤيته، عقيدته، منهجه في التعامل مع المسيحية ومع المسيحيين ومع السيدة مريم العذراء في أيقونة وتمثال. بينما حقيقتهم هذه حقيقتهم. شفنا وزير العدل الحالي وهو يشرف على قتل امرأة إطلاقا بالرصاص وتنفيذ حكم إعدام وهو يحطم تمثال السيدة العذراء. بئس ما جرى في سوريا وبئس من يبارك.
He's executing a woman. This is
هل
the
يمكن أن
Minister of
يستبشر
Justice.
أي أحد ولو كان مجنونا بحكم سوريا تحت قبضة هؤلاء؟
What are you expecting when you have a government that the head of that government is in former ISIS, former Al-Qaeda, and then he went and he started his own Syria version of Al-Qaeda, which was focused on mostly in Syria, on ethnically cleansing Syria. And then he comes and he takes the government. That's like Osama bin Laden taking a government and bringing, his deputies, and then America will come and say, let's start giving them money. This is exactly it. These people are in the government right now. Here's my question for you, Daniel. U.S. Army veteran. You were a former Apache pilot in the U.S. Army. Then before that, you were an IDF veteran. You were a tank commander in the IDF. So if you've learned about Israel, you grew up in Israel, you've learned about Syria, and then later on you served in Afghanistan, correct?
Yeah, correct.
What did you think about the pulling out from Afghanistan?
There's two arguments that can be made, right? It's either should we or should we not have left from there? Then the second one is how should we have done it? Should we have left from there? Yeah, I think 20 years is plenty of blood, money, and effort to put into a country. The way it was done was not done correctly at all. Even earlier than that, you can ask, though, how should we have gone into it? I mean, that's a larger discussion, that probably a different topic. But ultimately, I think it should have been a lot more focused. You go in there, destroy terrorist infrastructure, and leave. The West, then primarily from the U.S., we had a very naive idea and understanding of the Middle East. You go in there, show them democracy, get them blue jeans and some McDonald's franchises, and everything's going to be great. Democracy really ultimately is incompatible at the most basic level with the culture and the religion, right? It's very patriarchal, and it's not built on equality. Everybody has the same voice, all the way from the family unit, right? And you understand, of course, both of us grew up, we understand the Middle Eastern culture from growing up there, seeing it, experiencing it. You have the head of the family, the father, then you had the head of the expanded family, the grandfather. Then you have the head of the clan, right? That's the kind of the family name, the local. Then you have the tribe, and then you have the region, and then you have a warlord, and then you have this whole thinking that we can just go in there like, oh, democracy, everybody has a voice. Oh, by the way, also women that were property until now, they have the same exact voice as you do. So pretending that we can just go and change that. Should we try to change it? Absolutely. Is there a real way to change it? Hasn't worked yet. Nobody's figured that one out quite yet. But on the other hand, so then you have a situation. Okay, so we're talking about current events now with Syria. Marco Rubio does have a point, and of course, beyond that, Trump was where the real guidance comes from. We can either not engage with them because they are obviously documented evil people, but then where does that leave us, right? There's no dialogue. Or should we draw a moral line and say, like, no, if you're evil, we don't deal with you, right? That's kind of the question going on all over the world. We have the very similar situation also, Ukraine. Talking Putin is very obviously the one in the wrong. He's the aggressor. But also right now, I don't know if you saw the recent headline right now, the U.S. is not going to be adding new sanctions to Russia, and the EU will be alone. The U.S. refused to join in on that. Now, Trump is a deal maker, right? He says that, and by all evidence, we see that he's very anti-war, regardless of what it is, who it is, and where it is. He's anti-war, he wants business, and he wants peace and prosperity. The question comes, what's the price? How much are you willing to pay potentially to have peace? And also, if you pay that price, are you really going to get peace? Because there's a very poor track record for appeasing bad people. Very rarely does it work out. And I'm not sure of an example where it did. So
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. In Afghanistan, the US pulled out and it didn't make Afghanistan better. And for some bizarre reason, the US have been sending them a lot of money. We're just seeing like every week, every month, you hear another rule and verdict that women are not allowed to do this, are not allowed to do that. First it was girls are not allowed to go to school anymore. They just crushed the dreams of, millions of girls. And then girls are not allowed to leave the house, are not allowed to do. Now they're not allowed to show their face, their hair. It just keeps, when you start giving money to these kind of people, they don't use that to build a better future. And in Syria, to think if you give money to these people, they're not going to make it a better Syria. They are very focused on ethnic cleansing of that land and enforcing Sharia law to the fullest. That's literally why they started this, organization. If the money is going to fix that, wow, it's like the classic American naiveness. Capitalism, yeah, let's just give them money, give them some McDonald's, like you said, and help them open Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they're gonna love it. They're gonna be just like us. I mean, why do you think so?
honestly, they're being optimistic. It's always kind of been an American thing, right? Like, oh, we can do it. Everybody loves freedom. Let's do it, y'all. However, reality is very different than that. So it's a lot of it really is optimism and good intentions. But you also know what they say about good intentions.
Yeah. Let's show the video of Trump when he's actually saying that, just so the viewers can understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is from about a week ago, right? I think it was 7 or 8 days now.
Yeah, that's when his visit to the Middle East. So Ranfield, pull that out.
As in Syria, which has seen so much misery and death, there is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade.
Who's clapping hands?
And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince.
Oh, I didn't notice Musk is right behind him.
And also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East. I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
People in Syria are terrified. A lot of my relatives and friends, when that happened, they were terrified. They're saying, "Oh my God, is America lying?" Because they were hoping that America is going to come and actually save them. Because there's a attempted, we can call it genocide almost, to the Christians, to the Alawites, to the Druze. The only one that is actually preventing the bloodshed in Syria is Israel. And they're doing that kind of indirectly because Israel came and told El-Shara, Jawlani, that if he brings his forces, his goons, southern of Damascus, Israel is going to take them out. Because Israel doesn't want these, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas-like people on our border because we're not going to allow an October 7th to happen again. Luckily, for many of the Druze, they are living southern from Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, Rubio was talking about that there's a potential that these things will start happening there. The potential that an all-out war is going to go, it's going to go apocalyptic, grand scale. It started.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Well, apocalyptic is also in the Middle East. That's called Tuesday. But
Yeah, that's October 7th is happening all around the Middle East all the time. Only the world is ignoring it. So
no, but with all fairness, I mean, Israel does such a good job at defense. I mean, at some point, anybody will slip up, right? It always happens at some point. So October 7th was definitely not the standard. However, the Middle East in general, if you're looking on Muslim on Muslim or Arab on Arab violence, that is ongoing and continuous. The thing is, the Western media generally does not care. If you had a headline on CNN every time that there was a raid on a village, there was a suicide bombing where it's Muslim on Muslim, I mean, you'd have no other room for other headlines. But it's not touched on. So, okay, Israel does a strike, then it's main headlines. So that aside, the Trump video right there. So he's talking about, he mentions how the Syrians have suffered, which they absolutely have. They've had a brutal regime since forever. Right, we're talking since the founding of Syria. We're talking post-World War II. It's always been a brutal regime. But now he said, okay, now there's been horrible violence and atrocities, but now there's a new government. The people in the new government are the ones that were part of those atrocities. So is it
or the leaders of
government?
these atrocities, yeah.
It's not like they, some new people just materialize out of the ether. They're like, oh, hey, we're here to be leaders now in Syria. It's like they kind of killed their way to that position. So
Well, that's
let's,
exactly what they did.
yeah. So let's, there's kind of a little bit of walking between the obstacles here to get a message out. And now that you lift the sanctions, it legitimizes and gives more power to this group, who, by the way, of course, we know are killers. So the U.S. is effectively legitimizing their leadership and giving them backing. And now that you lift sanctions, that allows Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all these other countries now to officially they can give support to this group, because until now they'd have to do it back channel. So now officially they can support. We're going to see how that plays out. Now I think the hope is that these people, the current leadership, this government, they ultimately maybe have peaceful ideas. Now, is it going to be ideal? No, it's never going to be good for the Druze and the Christians and other minorities that aren't in their tribe. But if it does stabilize it enough to bring at least a semblance of normalcy, and families can go back to their homes and actually live in relative peace, I mean, that's what we can hope for, really. I think that's the best we can hope for. We're not going to see some kind of utopia spring out of this, but
No, that's what you can hope for. But the thing is, even if El-Shara Jawlani had a come to Jesus moment, not a come to Muhammad, a come to Jesus moment, and he decided now to go and become super peaceful, the problem is that if he will try to protect the minorities in Syria, his people will behead him. These guys that we saw breaking the statues and executing the woman, even if he wanted to, it's impossible for him. Something very interesting, you saw that he mentioned Turkey and he mentioned Saudi Arabia. And there's something very interesting here. These two forces have an agenda to make Syria Sunni, not Shia. They don't have an agenda to make Syria great, to make Syria democracy. And America is just kind of walking into that, coming with bags of money and a lot of promises. Yeah, we're going to help you guys and I don't know what. They're walking into a trap. I heard actually something very interesting. There is apparently a lot of natural resources and minerals in Syria that are extremely wanted by the big countries, America, China, and Russia.
mhm.
And America doesn't want it to fall to the hands of Chinese or the Russians, so they rather be the ones that will make a deal with the devil, so they can start, working on these resources, which won't surprise me. I mean, that's a smart move to make.
Yeah.
'Cause there's a lot of resources, but the thing is, they always say that the best time to invest is when there's blood in the streets, and that is what's happening.
Are we going into stock advices now?
Yeah, stock advice with the Middle East. I mean, but I'm pretty sure that there's something there regarding money and resources.
Well,
Otherwise, why would America even wanna enter that mud? And I'm not saying that like as a terrible bad thing. Countries do that all the time. Countries
Yeah.
wanna create allies and wanna create resources that will make them better, but at what cost? That is the question here.
yeah.
And maybe that's why it's gonna bring, the next video that I wanted to show, unless you have something to say before.
No, I was just gonna say, maybe just to touch on that point. Nothing in this world is free. Now, is it the primary goal or secondary? So if we want peace and we can get some and there's something to benefit effectively to balance out the expenses. Since we're talking resources, it's the same thing as that mineral deal that was signed between the US and Ukraine, right? That's the US will continue support and they'll get contracts for the rare earth minerals in Ukraine, which they have a lot of. So, some people are always, oh, that's not fair. Why are we not just supporting that? Like, well, we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, we're not a charity, with all due respect to the rest of the planet, which treats the US like a piggy bank. It's not a charity. Okay. So it's only fair. Now, if that's the primary goal, of course, that's something else. That's like, you're invading to exploit.
A response by an Israeli minister that's talking to Trump about this. I find it very good. Ranfield, pull that out.
Fast allies, even the slightest shift concerns us. As president, advancing American interest will always be at the forefront, and rightfully so. And sometimes economic gains for America may come at the expense of Israel's interests, as we've seen recently. But we must also remember, a stronger America means also a stronger Israel. Yet, just as America must put her own interest first, so too must Israel. Yeah. And when our closest friends may be making a mistake, we must speak truth. So I have two important requests for President Trump in the name of so many people who deeply appreciate him. On Iran, now is not the time for another deal that will fail. Now is the time to strike while Iran is weak. Any deal with Iran isn't worth the paper it's on. The Ayatollah regime will simply lie or wait for a new administration before advancing their nuclear program. We need decisive action. Bring down the Ayatollahs. Chart a new path for a free Iran. No more kicking the can down the road. And when it comes to Qatar, those terrorists in suits, I need to respectfully raise a concern. While I appreciate President Trump's commitment to creating economic prosperity, we must not lose sight of our guiding values. Gifts from those who bankrolled October 7th, promote anti-Israel incitement and support terror must raise a red flag. So, Mr. President, I turn to you and I urge you, don't let Qatar whitewash their crimes. Don't accept their plane. The plane carrying the leader of the free world, is a symbol of the sacred values that we fight to uphold. It must not be tarnished by the funders of jihad. Mr. President, your administration has always stood alongside Israel against terror. We are not just allies. We are brothers in arms who must face evil together. Unwavering and uncompromising. This is our North Star.
Yeah. When you think about it, it is kind of something that the president's new plane was paid for by the same bank account that paid for October 7th.
Yeah.
When the receipts go to the same place, you might have concern there.
that paid for the universities and the professors that were trying to bring down America, and Trump was so against it. It's like there's a clear connection. Qatar was the biggest sponsor of these universities, and they hate America, and they're brainwashing the heads of young Americans. Paid for terrorist organizations from Al Qaeda all the way to Hamas, Hezbollah, and then the plane. It's like buying their way through everything. Quite insane. Quite insane.
Well, what's the old saying? Follow the money.
Follow the money, yeah. But you showed me a funny video, and maybe we can finish with that video.
So just have a send off.
Yeah, send off. So this is what was that? This is the welcoming.
I think it's the welcoming to the UAE.
Yeah, Ranfield, pull that video.
Now, I'm not sure. Not sure anybody was happy with that.
No,
It's not
That was
exactly it's not exactly a good look. It's a little bit what's the word I would even use for that? It's like old school dictatory.
that's just bizarre. Yeah, that was.
No, so I don't see anybody in the West who would think that that's exactly a good look. I don't think anybody that's a follower of Islam thinks that that's a good look.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure who exactly thinks that that was a good idea.
Yeah, it's like that video that we watched where there's a Muslim guy that explaining why this is not okay and doesn't represent Islam, and everybody's listening to this thinking like, wow, he's gonna say something nice, something good. Yeah, this is a disgrace. And then he says, and then he goes to the point that women should not show their hair.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, that went south really fast. And that was his point. That was his take on this.
Yeah, not unexpectedly.
Anyway, let's keep a good look on what's happening in Syria. It looks like they're gonna have an apocalyptic outbreak happening pretty soon, and that lifting of sanction is probably not gonna help stabilize the place, just gonna give the bad guys more money.
Yeah.
That's at least my take on it. All right, thanks for coming, Daniel.
Absolutely.